Imagine a woman. She entered the palace as a slave, but one day she sat on the throne of an empire. Her name was Shajar al-Durr, one of the most surprising, mysterious, and dramatic female rulers in history. The truth about Shajar al-Durr's origins is still uncertain. Some say she was Turkic, others claim she was Armenian or from the Caucasus. But in the end, it didn't matter. From the moment she entered the palace, her intelligence, beauty, and ambition made her stand out. At first, she was just a concubine, but soon she won the heart of Sultan al-Salih Ayyub and became his most trusted wife. But this wasn't just an ordinary love story, because Shajar al-Durr's destiny would shape not only the fate of the palace, but the entire Muslim world. The year was 1249. Crusader armies under King Louis IX of France attacked Egypt and captured the city of Damietta. In Cairo, fear and chaos spread through the palace. At the same time, Sultan al-Salih fell gravely ill and was on his deathbed. Just imagine it. The enemy was at the gates, the army's morale was broken, the palace was filled with plots, and the Sultan was about to breathe his last. And in the middle of this chaos, there was only one person by his side, Shajar al-Durr. From that moment on, history began to change. With her husband's life slipping away, she held not only his fate in her hands, but also the fate of the entire empire. The decisions she would make would determine the future of Cairo and the entire Muslim world. But no one could have imagined that this former slave woman was about to keep one of history's greatest secrets, shocking the whole world. When Shajar al-Durr first came to the palace as a young slave, life seemed full of luxury and wealth, but it was also surrounded by danger and intrigue. Every corner hid a secret, every step could be a trap, but she was no ordinary woman. Her intelligence and determination quickly drew attention. Palace officials, commanders, and even Sultan al-Salih began to notice her talents. Calm in appearance, bold in decisions, and sharp in wit, she started climbing the ranks of the palace. For Sultan al-Salih, she became more than just a favorite. She became a trusted advisor. Soon he officially made her his wife. That marriage was a turning point. No longer just a concubine, she was now a figure at the heart of power. But the palace was a nest of power struggles. Shajar al-Durr didn't just win the Sultan's love, she began to influence state affairs. Military commanders, tax collectors, and ministers realized her sharp mind. The Sultan valued her counsel and allowed her to take part in running the state. Her rise was more than personal success. It showed how a woman in a male-dominated world could seize power. Some admired her, others envied her, but everyone noticed her. And at that moment, her destiny was sealed. She would not only be the Sultan's wife, but the woman who would shape the empire's future. The year was 1249. The Crusaders marched into Egypt and seized Damietta. Cairo was in panic. The army's morale was shattered. And in the middle of it all, Sultan al-Salih grew weaker by the day. For Shajar al-Durr, this was a moment of life or death. If the Sultan died, chaos would erupt. The army would collapse and the Crusaders would crush Egypt. Worse, rival factions inside the palace were already plotting for the throne. So she made a decision that would go down in history. She hid the Sultan's death. For days, no one knew he had died. Meals were still delivered to his chambers, and empty plates were sent back out. Shajar al-Durr used the Sultan's seal to govern the state herself. It was a dangerous gamble. If anyone discovered the truth, her enemies both inside and outside the palace, would destroy her. But she stayed calm, worked with the army's commanders, and kept the state running. Thanks to her, Egypt stood firm even after the Sultan's death. A woman who had once been a slave was now leading the country from the shadows. This was her moment of true power, the moment when a woman's intelligence and courage changed the course of history. After the Sultan's death, a new ruler was needed. Shajar al-Durr summoned his son, Turan Shah, to take the throne. He rushed from Upper Egypt to Cairo and was crowned the heir of the Ayyubid dynasty. At first, everything seemed fine, but Turan Shah's behavior soon caused problems. He dismissed experienced commanders, replaced them with his own men, and even began to clash with his stepmother, Shajar al-Durr. She had been the one keeping the empire together after the Sultan's death, but Turan Shah felt threatened by her power. He tried to strip her influence and isolate her. The military elite, the Mamluks, also grew angry as Turan Shah confiscated their lands and wealth. Tension rose inside the palace. Whispers of betrayal filled the halls. Finally, in 1250, the breaking point came. At the Battle of Mansoura, the Mamluks turned on Turan Shah and killed him. With his death, the Ayyubid dynasty came to an end. And once again, Shajar al-Durr stood at the center of history. She wasn't just the Sultan's widow anymore. She was now the power that would decide Egypt's future. With Turan Shah dead, Egypt had no ruler. The country was on the brink of chaos. And at that moment, Shajar al-Durr made her boldest move. With the army's support, in 1250, she declared herself the ruler of Egypt. For the first time in Egyptian history, a woman sat on the throne. Her reign was short, but it was powerful. Under her, the Mamluks consolidated their strength. The Ayyubid dynasty had ended, and a new chapter, the Mamluk Sultanate, was born. Shajar al-Durr's story was no ordinary tale. She had entered the palace as a slave, become the Sultan's wife, ruled the empire from behind the curtain, and finally sat on the throne herself. Her courage, her ambition, and her brilliance made her unforgettable. She was living proof that power, strategy, and bravery could change the course of history, even when the world insisted it was impossible. But Shajar al-Durr knew she couldn't rule alone. To secure her position, she married one of the most powerful Mamluk commanders, Aybak. At first, this marriage was political, but soon tension filled the palace once again. Aybak began asserting his own authority, pushing Shajar al-Durr aside. And then came the final betrayal. Aybak planned to marry another woman. For Shajar al-Durr, this was unbearable. In a fit of jealousy and fury, she made a deadly decision. In 1257, Aybak was murdered while bathing in the palace hammam. But this was her greatest mistake. Aybak's concubines and supporters rose in revenge. They captured Shajar al-Durr. According to chroniclers, she was beaten to death by the concubines and her body was thrown from the palace walls. A woman who had entered the palace as a slave, risen to become a queen, and ruled Egypt, now met a brutal, bloody end. Her body was later buried in the mausoleum she had built for herself in Cairo. And even today, that tomb still stands, a silent witness to her rise and her tragic fall. Shajar al-Durr's story reminds us of a timeless truth. Power, intelligence, and courage can take someone to the very top, but jealousy, betrayal, and ambition can drag them to their doom. If Shajar al-Durr's extraordinary life moved you, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us bring you more dramatic stories from history. And make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because there are still countless secrets and untold tales waiting for you in the dark corridors of history. Remember, what you just heard was not just a story. It was history whispering its secrets to you. Stay with us for more.